Right, so we're now at the stage of checking for clearances really. We've done one kind of rough engine mount. It's not fully finished. It's currently spaced with a screwdriver just to make sure it's kind of roughly in the right place. This side hasn't been made at all. It's just, again, the inner side has been clearanced to kind of get it in its sitting position. There's not much room at the back. Obviously those bits on the bulkhead need to come off, which are the boost valves and stuff. I'm doing a vac line simplification, so I'll do that in a future video. I'm only going to run an N75. Obviously all the EGR stuff took off anyway, so there's no need for kind of most of those valves on the back. But yeah, basically I've took the engine crane out. Obviously if you follow me, be extremely careful because there's nothing really supporting the engine. It's just sat on the engine there. And then I've got two jacks. I've got the left hand side one which is holding the weight. It's held on the gearbox mount at the rear, and the front one is just holding on the very edge of the box, which is a big tab, and that's giving me kind of roughly the correct angle it sits at. I've confirmed the angle of the engine's about right. If not, it's better than factory, with the terms of the cam belt sitting higher than the gearbox side, as confirmed previously with the 1.4 that I've just shown you. So yeah, I'm happy basically where it's sat, other than the fact that the engine's kind of not supported very well. We can now check for bonnet clearance. If you look down here, you could be led to believe in thinking that that is not going to clear anything. The rear kind of inlet pipe has a 90 that comes off it and runs down the side of the cam cover, or a 45 depending on kind of how much clearance you've got. And additionally there's this oil cap which can be dropped down very easily because that's got an extension in it at the moment, so that can be took off and dropped down. I've just not done it yet. But yeah, we're going to check for clearance. So kind of I'm going to be very careful and put the bonnet down. Now the bonnet on this, we're going to do worst case scenario because actually the bonnet will sit like this. I'm going to hold it down just because then that gives me an extra, if you can see by the gap on the wing, it gives me an extra bit of room to play with just for the worst case scenario. So this will be probably giving you the idea if there was a real bad bump which chucked the engine up, it would kind of show you the worst case scenario. So this is obviously underneath, and looking around you can see there's a lot of clearance. There is a lot of clearance. Now this kind of felt is sagging a lot, but there's a huge amount of clearance on top of the cam cover. Get my hand in, there's loads of room all the way around this. There's loads of room everywhere, so there's going to be no problems with anything touching anywhere. Same with the top of the cam cover. You should be able to see now there's loads of room. Obviously that piece of metal at the front to do with my engine hoist, but yeah, we've got plenty of room in here, plenty of room. So we've confirmed height wise and loads of clearance, loads of space for everything. So now it's just a case of we're going to leave this mount as it is, not completely finished. We're going to jump onto this side to concentrate on making a mounting point for the top part of the mount on the chassis rail. So you can do that by making an adapter plate using those threaded sections there, or just one across the top. So I'm going to look at the mount on the gearbox just to see if any of the OEM stuff works. I've got an 08A gearbox or an A8. It's the Fabia long ratio. It's a sought after box. Apparently it's a pretty rare box, but it is an 02M, which is pretty much the standard 02M casting, which is pretty much the standard one that you find with all the PD engines and also the 1.8 turbos, etc. So the mount wise will be the same. Now I've got the two versions here. I've got the one from the Mark 4 Golf, which is that one, and then this one is the Fabia's own one. Part number, if anyone wants it, is 6Q0199111T. Now, there is no chance whatsoever that the Golf one's going to fit, because, as you can see, it's not going to go across because of this mounting point here. Now, we could just cut this straight off and have it further back, and it probably would fit in, but it'd still be tight against the chassis rail. So, Golf isn't going to work in this scenario. Fabia VRS. Now this will be a standard 6-speed one. As you can see, similar sort of problem. However, again, if you was to lob this off, it probably would fit. We're not going to remove this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this bracket. So I'm going to butcher it quite a bit, but the plan is to basically use the pickup points and fabricate a bracket in between. So this would be the cheapest way of doing it, is pick up one of these and a bit of steel and just basically fabricate. So I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to cut it up and I'll show you kind of what I'll do and where we get, and if there's any measurements and stuff, I'll make sure to copy them down for you. Right, so looking at this, I've kind of worked out how I'm going to cut it. My ideal thing now is to keep that completely straight, because obviously that's going to help with the mounting, keeping the engine angle of the engine correct. Obviously, it sits on the car like this. You've got the problem of this side. So basically, this bit is too close to the chassis rail with the height of it. And obviously this part here. And we kind of want a nice flat section to put our mount on. So I'm going to try and carry on with the flat section here. So I'm going to take that off there. I'm going to literally cut down here, around and around there, which will just basically take the top part of this section off and away, but leaving obviously this crucially in the right place, and obviously this part. And then the rear, I was originally going to chop that out, and I might do just to make it easier to get the angle grinder in, but it's going to be finished by where it bends up here. Instead of it bending up here, it's going to bend down. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to cut this section here across, which will give me then enough head clearance on the bolt, and then there'll be a good bit of clearance between the chassis rail. So that will be cut round here, and then up where the seam is, I'm going to go vertically back on itself to square that piece up. And then once that's cut out, we're back around here. So it'll be a nice piece, and then all I'll need to do is put a nice filler piece of steel in here, and probably just a visual nice kind of tidy piece of steel here, and that should make a real nice low profile flat top mount. So yeah, I'm going to cut it. I'm not going to do a video of the cutting, just simply because it's kind of boring, and I'll show you kind of the next stage of where I get to with this. Right, so this is where we are with the mount. Obviously that section was cut off, you can discard that. That section was cut off, and then using these to make stencil for a bit of steel, we've got a filler section to go on here, which we're going to weld on. We've also then got a filler section. This is going to need welding and sort of manipulating, but we're going to weld it in and kind of bend it where it needs to go, maybe flat disc it and whatnot. So we'll have basically a nice solid mount then. That'll be the nice solid section. Obviously it's keeping everything in position because we've not actually moved anything. Any kind of bits, if you've kind of angle grinded by mistake in certain areas like I've done, can be filled up on this stage. So then yeah, we'll have a fairly flat base to start from then. I mean, this has only took 10 minutes to kind of knock it down to this sort of stage. Then we're going to build off of, well, we're going to work out where the top of the mount comes to, and then we can build off this flat. And then even if we need to, obviously, because that's thick steel and it's welded into a nice kind of sort of gusset part both sides, we can even kind of tap off here if we need to. So my plan is I'm going to do a flat section, and then I might just then angle it in with 3 sides to make it nice and solid. But yeah, I'm going to weld these up now. I'm going to do proper, I'm going to fully weld it, let that cool down, and then I'm going to come back to it and make the top section once that bit's ready. So this is kind of phase 1. We're going on to phase 2 in a minute once this is all welded. Now the plan is that obviously this mount goes on top of here, and I don't really want to cut too much as metal work away. So what I'm going to do is, I've got some 5mm steel, which you'll see here is pretty thick. It's probably overkill, but I'm going to modify this very slightly. But instead of cutting a massive amount away, I'm going to probably add more strength into it. So I'm going to trim back here where these thick lines are, just because this is kind of not needed. So I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to do the same at the back. I'm just going to trim that back, and then I'm going to use a big thick piece of 5mm steel, and that is then going to be welded to the top of here. So basically I've got a nice thick weld round here, and additionally a weld round the back. Now that'll be a big fat plate for it to sit on. The only other 2 things I've got to do is making my mount holes, and I'll show you what I mean. I need to weld some captive nuts into the plate. So you'll see that the first hole sits kind of in the, it's not the original hole, but there is a hole in there. You see the original hole to the left of it, but basically the other hole it's in the perfect position. However, you can't get to the back of it and there's no captive nut in it. So what I'm going to have to, and then the back is, there's nothing kind of there. It's just very much on the lip of this point here. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have 2 captive nuts. So basically then that means I can just drop 2 bolts in, screw it up and tighten the mount down. So on this bit here, I'm going to drill this oversize out completely. And then on this bit here, I'm probably going to have to do 2 slits down with a grinder and try and break that piece of metal out. So there's a bit missing there. I mean, you can get to the back of it, you can see my finger, so it doesn't need to be watertight or anything. So like a big chunk missing there is fine. And what that'll do is allow me, for the plate that's going on, to have 2 captive nuts welded to the back, and then drop it in before welding, weld it all up, and then I'll have my 2 fixing points for this. So then when it comes to fitting it, I could just simply drop it in and screw it up. Right, so this is what I've come up with. Basically 2 nuts welded onto the back of that 5mm steel plate. And then the chassis has just basically had the original, I mean, they need to clean this, but the original bits have just knocked out. Now that's an open hole, so what we're going to do is we're going to spray some weld-free primer on it. And then we'll fill that with, once it's cleaned up, we'll fill it with some wax oil type products. But it's an open hole anyway, so it doesn't really matter. As long as that's all cleaned up, that's fine. And then we're gonna use the plate on here and basically weld it in.